I have had the opportunity over my career to really develop a deep appreciation for what you do. First, having worked with the Health Partners Medical Group physician practice as their VP of Finance, and now sitting in my chair at Regions, you are what makes the healthcare world turn. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I know at Regions are very dedicated and will be forever to teaching. And so I'm excited about being a part of the redesign of that, what that future might look like. So I'm going to take just a few minutes and walk you through funding. I'm going to talk at the global level, then briefly about where we spend our money at Regions. So as a federal government, we spend about $9.5 billion on education. And what's important here is that the way the government looks at it, they're directing about 70% of those dollars to indirect medical education and 30% of it to direct medical education. At least that's their formulas, which are very old. That's kind of how they split the funds. Then you can see in Minnesota, we also do get money from our state, the Merck funds. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. I'm sure you're all familiar that we took a cut to those funds in the last biennium, where we were having budget cuts that was almost all restored now in this most recent budget. So you can see that now in our state in 2013, we get about $110,000 per resident FTE on average in the state. What I will say about the state funding was it was just a thrill to get it back, but we do face a challenge at the state level now. Many legislators look at that and say, we took that money away and nothing bad happened. And so we face an uphill battle, certainly at the state level, trying to educate our legislators on why that funding is important to us. So I'm going to be really transparent about where our money goes at Regions. So we get pots from both federal and state. So we get about 22 million total, I think was 23 in our, this is our 2012 money, I think. So the very first thing we do is we pay salaries and benefits of our resident FTEs. Some of those are at Regions, some of those are through our affiliation with the University of Minnesota. Then our next bucket goes now to the School of Medicine. So I think all of you know we put an administrative fee in place through our Minnesota Metropolitan Council on Graduate Medical Education. We worked out a formula to help support the University of Minnesota physicians that needed the support for funding for the administrative costs of teaching. So for us, that can run anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million a year, depending upon how many residents we're teaching. For us, we engage our teaching services through Health Partners Medical Group. So our faculty compensation and administrative costs for that are about $7.4 million. We support the Institute for Medical Education, so all the program directors, program coordinators, the SIM Center, kind of all of those, I consider those to be direct costs of teaching, go into that institute bucket. And so kind of what falls out, if you will, into the Regions pot is about $1.5 million of all of that funding. So think back to that last slide where the federal government thinks it's giving 70% of the funds to hospitals, which was intended to cover those extra costs that hospitals incur because they teach, and only 30% of it's supposed to go to direct. But you can see in reality, the formulas are actually very much mixed. And so, I think as we develop this community of practice and we really talk about redesigning healthcare and teaching, we can't be in a better position to do that in front of what may be coming in the form of legislative changes. Because the reality is the government's broke, and someday they're going to start to figure some things out and they're going to have to make some cuts somewhere. Now, of course, the question in today's world is when. They're not overly productive in Washington, D.C. at the moment. And so I can tell you when I look at the very active legislation, there's little that has an opportunity, I believe, or if you go out to that govtrack.com, where it'll give you predict how likely a bill is to move through Congress, there are very small percentages that there's any risk in immediate cuts. So what I like to do is look at what's been going on more broadly, and there have been many different organizations trying to figure out how to reinvent the funding for graduate medical education. So organizations like the Commonwealth Fund, the AAMC, all have been trying to think about different ways to move the money around and to put more money in the pot. So lots of them suggest moving to an all-payer model, and lots of them suggest new taxes. I think both of those things are going to be very challenging in a world where healthcare is already unaffordable for many, but those proposals are out there. But I don't see, although you are really the experts and would have to look more closely at those proposals, I don't see a lot of dramatic recommendations to how the actual teaching model changes. So I don't see them suggesting the pot get any smaller. They're either suggesting it gets bigger or it stays the same and just more people are paying in. And I think that's going to be really tough in today's world, today's economy, and certainly with the government situation the way it is. And I hope that what comes out of this Institute of Medicine report, I hear April, but April's almost over and I haven't heard any rumblings on graduate medical education, will start a different conversation. One much like I remember when Crossing the Quality Chasm came out, and it really started a whole different conversation about quality. And I remember being in some rooms where we said there's absolutely no way that higher quality care can cost less. But you've proved them wrong. I mean, look at every way, all the things you've done to make care even higher quality, and Minnesota is one of the lowest cost states there is. So I think you've proven them wrong, and I think now is our opportunity to prove them wrong about education too. I want to be like the farmers in Japan who face a challenge because the supermarkets are so small there that shelf space is at a premium. And so they set out to create a new watermelon that took less shelf space. So I want to do the same thing. Education is really, really important, and we can't stop teaching the caregivers of the future. We just got to do it a little different.